the island that appears and vanishes overnight. You've heard the stories your entire life, dismissed them as sailors' tales, born from too much rum and too little sleep. But standing on the deck of the research vessel at 3 a.m, watching the impossible unfold before your eyes, you realize that some legends refuse to stay buried in the past. The island wasn't there at sunset. You're certain of it. You'd scanned the horizon yourself with a high-powered telescope, logged the readings, marked the coordinates. Empty ocean. Nothing but the endless roll of waves beneath the darkening sky. Yet now, in the peculiar light of pre-dawn, there it is, a dark mass rising from the water, like a sleeping giant slowly opening one eye. Dr. Sarah Chen stands beside you, her coffee growing cold in her hands. She's muttering calculations under her breath, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile what her instruments are telling her with what her eyes can see. The sonar readings make no sense. The depth charts you'd mapped just hours ago show nothing but ocean floor 300 meters. Now, the instruments insist there's solid ground, vegetation, even what might be structures. This isn't possible, she says for the 3rd time, though her voice carries less conviction with each repetition. You've been part of this oceanographic expedition for 6 months, cataloguing the unexplored regions of the South Pacific. Your team has discovered new species of deep-sea fish, mapped previously uncharted underwater mountains, even found evidence of ancient volcanic activity. But nothing, absolutely nothing, has prepared you for this. The captain, a weathered Indonesian man named Budi, who spent 40 years navigating these waters, crosses himself and whispers something in a language you don't recognize. When you ask him about it later, he'll tell you about the old stories, about Pulau Hantu, the ghost island, about fishermen who'd stumbled upon it over the centuries, finding fresh water and fruit trees and beaches of black sand, only to return the next day and find nothing but open ocean and the lingering question of their own sanity. As the sun begins its slow climb above the horizon, the island becomes more distinct. You can make out individual trees now, their shapes strange and unfamiliar. There's a beach, just as the stories described, with sand so dark it looks like crushed obsidian. Further inland, you spot what appears to be ruins, stone structures covered in creeping vines, their architecture unlike anything you've seen in your studies of Pacific Island cultures. Sarah has her cameras out now, documenting everything. The scientific method demands evidence, verification, peer review, but you can see the tremor in her hands as she adjusts the lens. Some part of her understands that whatever you're witnessing exists beyond the comfortable boundaries of known science. The captain refuses to approach closer than half a kilometer. His crew, usually boisterous and fearless, works in unusual silence, casting nervous glances toward the impossible island. You don't blame them. There's something fundamentally wrong about the way the island sits in the water, as if it's not quite anchored to reality in the same way as the rest of the world. You volunteer to take the inflatable boat closer. Sarah argues against it. Proper protocol would be to document from a distance, to report the finding, to wait for a larger expedition with more resources. But you both know what will happen. By the time approvals come through and a new team assembles, the island will be gone. This is a moment that exists outside of time, and it demands immediate action. The journey across the half-kilometer of water feels both eternal and instantaneous. The island seems to pulse with each stroke of the oars, growing more solid and real as you approach, yet somehow remaining ephemeral, as if it might dissolve back into sea foam at any moment. The water around it moves strangely too. The waves don't break against the shore the way they should. Instead, they seem to pass through it, as if the island exists slightly out of phase with the surrounding ocean. When the inflatable boat's bow finally scrapes against the black sand, you sit for a long moment, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what you're doing. You're about to step onto land that shouldn't exist, that your instruments swear appeared out of nowhere in the span of a few hours. Every rational part of your mind screams that this is impossible, yet here you are. The sand crunches beneath your boots with a sound like breaking glass. It's not actually sand, you realize as you crouch to examine it. It's volcanic rock, ground so fine by some unknown process that it mimics the texture of beach sand. You scoop some into a sample container, already imagining the lab analysis, the questions it will raise, papers that might be written if anyone believes you. The air smells wrong. Not bad, exactly, but different. There's the expected salt of the ocean, but underneath it, something else. Ozone, perhaps, or the metallic tang that comes before a lightning strike. The temperature feels off, too, several degrees cooler than it should be given the tropical climate and the rising sun. You make your way inland, following what might be a path or might simply be a gap in the vegetation. The plants are unlike anything in your field guides. Some resemble ferns, but with leaves that shimmer with an iridescent quality, catching the light in ways that seem to defy standard botanical behavior. Others look almost familiar, similar to breadfruit or pandanus, but with subtle differences in their structure that mark them as something other. The ruins appear suddenly, emerging from the jungle growth, like teeth from diseased gums. They're made of the same black stone as the sand, but carved with precision that suggests advanced tools and mathematical knowledge. The symbols etched into the surfaces aren't any language you recognize, yet there's something hauntingly familiar about their patterns, as if they're tapping into some deep ancestral memory. You photograph everything, your camera clicking in rapid succession, knowing that physical evidence might be all that stands between you and accusations of elaborate hoaxing or mental breakdown. The structures form a rough circle, 12 pillars surrounding a central platform. On that platform sits something that makes your breath catch. A perfect sphere of what looks like polished obsidian, about the size of a basketball, resting in a carved depression. Your hand reaches toward it before your conscious mind registers the movement. The moment your fingers make contact, everything changes. The island lurches beneath you, or perhaps you lurch, or perhaps reality itself shifts slightly on its axis. The sphere is warm, impossibly warm for stone that's been sitting in pre-dawn air. Heat radiates up your arm, but it's not painful. It's almost pleasant, like sinking into a hot bath after a long cold day. Images flood your mind, too fast to process individually, but living impressions like photographs developing in solution. You see the island rising from the sea, not through geological processes, but through something else. Intention, perhaps, or need. You see people, their faces both familiar and alien, working the stone, building the structures, placing the sphere with reverent care. You see them leaving, walking into the ocean without fear, the water accepting them as if they belonged there more than on land. You see the island sinking, receding, vanishing beneath waves that close over it like a healing wound. You see it rising again and again and again in a cycle that stretches back further than human memory, further perhaps than humanity itself. When you pull your hand away, gasping, the sun has climbed noticeably higher in the sky. Time has passed, minutes or hours, you can't tell. Your radio crackles with Sarah's voice, tight with worry, demanding to know your status. You respond automatically, assuring her you're fine, that you're returning to the boat, even as your mind struggles to process what just happened. The walk back to the beach feels different. The island seems more solid now, more real, as if your touch somehow anchored it further into existence. Or perhaps it's the opposite. Perhaps you've become less real, partially attuned to whatever strange frequency the island vibrates on. You're halfway across the water, back to the research vessel when you hear it. A sound like singing, but deeper than any human voice could produce. It seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the water, through the air, through your very bones. You turn back to look at the island, and for just a moment, you see figures standing on the beach. They're watching you, these impossible people, and though you can't make out their features at this distance, you know they're smiling. By the time you climb aboard the research vessel, your legs shaking from more than just physical exertion, the singing has stopped. Sarah helps you up, firing questions faster than you can answer. The rest of the crew gathers around, their earlier fear overcome by curiosity and the need to know what you found. You tell them everything, knowing how it sounds, watching their expressions shift from excitement to concern to barely concealed skepticism. The photographs will help, you think. The samples will provide proof. But even as you think it, you glance at your camera's display screen and feel your stomach drop. The images are there, technically. The ruins are visible, the strange vegetation, even the sphere. But there's something wrong with them. They're blurred in ways that have nothing to do with camera shake or poor focus. The structures seem to shift position between frames, as if the island couldn't quite decide where its own features should be. The sphere appears in some shots as solid black, in others as translucent, and in one particularly unsettling image, it seems to be looking back at the camera with something distressingly like awareness. Sarah examines the photographs with a deepening frown. She's trying to maintain scientific objectivity, to find rational explanations. Unusual atmospheric conditions, equipment malfunction, anything that fits within the comfortable boundaries of known phenomena. But you can see the doubt creeping into her eyes. This is too strange, too consistent in its strangeness, to be dismissed as simple technical error. The sample container you'd filled with the black sand presents its own mystery. Under the research vessel's microscope, the particles don't behave like volcanic glass should. They seem to move slightly, even in the absence of any vibration or air current, arranging and rearranging themselves into patterns that almost resemble writing. Sarah runs every test she can think of: spectrographic analysis, chemical composition, crystalline structure, and each test returns results that contradict the previous one, as if the substance can't quite decide what it wants to be. Captain Booty keeps the ship at its safe distance, but he's stationed crew members to watch the island constantly. You join them for the vigil as the day progresses, watching the impossible landmass that continues to defy every law of geology and physics by simply existing. During the afternoon, you spot movement on the beach. The same figures you'd glimpsed earlier, though now there are more of them. They don't appear to be doing anything in particular, just existing in their strange, half-real state, occasionally looking out toward the ship with what might be curiosity or might be warning. As evening approaches, Sarah pulls you aside. She's been on the radio with the expedition's funding organization, trying to report the discovery, and the conversation hasn't gone well. Without more concrete evidence, without data that makes sense within accepted scientific frameworks, they're dismissing it as a hoax or hallucination. They're suggesting contaminated water supplies, collective hysteria, even the possibility of a publicity stunt. The frustration radiates off her in waves. "We need to go back," she says quietly. "Both of us this time. More cameras, more samples, detailed measurements, something that can't be explained away or dismissed as equipment malfunction." You know she's right, but something in your gut twists at the thought of returning to that beach, touching that sphere again. The visions it had shown you weren't just images, they were invitations, or perhaps warnings. The island appears and vanishes for a reason, following some pattern or purpose that your brief contact only hinted at. But scientific curiosity wins out over caution, as it so often does. As the sun begins its descent toward the horizon, you and Sarah prepare another expedition to the island. This time, you bring more equipment: ground-penetrating radar, core sampling tools, electromagnetic field detectors, anything that might provide objective data about this impossible place. The figures on the beach watch as you approach. In the golden light of late afternoon, you can see them more clearly now. They're human in shape, but not quite in substance, as if they're made of water and light and memory, rather than flesh and bone. They don't try to stop you as you land the inflatable boat and haul your equipment onto the black sand. They simply watch, with expressions that might be sadness, or might be something else entirely. Sarah sets up the ground-penetrating radar while you begin taking soil samples. The work is methodical, familiar, grounding. It helps to focus on concrete tasks, to let your hands remember their training while your mind grapples with the impossible nature of your surroundings. The radar, however, refuses to cooperate. It shows the island extending down into the water, but the readings fluctuate wildly. One moment the island has roots reaching hundreds of meters into the ocean floor. The next moment it appears to be floating on the surface like a lily pad. The next, it seems to exist simultaneously at multiple depths. You make your way back to the ruins, Sarah following close behind. The electromagnetic field detectors are going haywire, their needles swinging back and forth as if caught in an invisible storm. The sphere still sits on its platform, warm and patient, waiting. This time, you approach it with more caution, pulling out a thermal imaging camera first. The camera's display shows the sphere as a point of intense heat, far hotter than it feels to your nearby skin. But it's not radiating that heat into the surrounding air the way physics demands it should. Instead, the thermal energy seems to be flowing into the sphere from somewhere else, as if it's connected to some distant source of power through channels you can't perceive. Sarah reaches out to touch it, but you stop her. "Wait," you say, and spend several minutes explaining what happened when you made contact earlier. The visions, the lost time, the sense of being fundamentally changed by the experience. She listens with the careful attention of a scientist evaluating experimental protocols, then reaches out anyway. Her reaction is different from yours. where you had been overwhelmed by images and sensations, she seems to achieve some kind of communion with the sphere. Her eyes lose focus, but not in a way that suggests unconsciousness. Instead, she appears to be looking at something vast and complex, her expression shifting through wonder, fear, understanding, and finally a kind of peaceful acceptance. When she pulls away, tears are streaming down her face. "It's not an island," she whispers. "It's a message, a warning." She struggles to articulate what she experienced, her scientific vocabulary failing to capture the essence of what the sphere communicated. But gradually, a picture emerges. The island is a marker, placed here millennia ago by people or beings who understood that the ocean holds memory the way stone holds heat. They'd witnessed something, some great catastrophe or transformation, and they'd created this place as a warning for those who would come after. The island appears when conditions align, when the same confluence of factors that preceded the ancient disaster begins to manifest again. You ask what disaster, what danger could be so important that it warranted creating something that defies the laws of nature? Sarah shakes her head, frustrated by the limitations of language and human perception. "It's about balance," she says finally. "The ocean, the land, the boundary between them. When that balance shifts too far, when too much is taken or too much is given, the system corrects itself. Violently, the implications settle over you like a heavy blanket. The rising sea levels, the changing ocean chemistry, the warming waters, all the environmental changes that your expedition has been documenting. According to the sphere's message, these aren't just concerning trends. They're symptoms of an approaching threshold, a point of no return after which the ocean will reclaim what it has lost, reshaping coastlines and swallowing cities in a correction that has happened before and will happen again. The sun is touching the horizon now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seem too vivid to be natural. The figures on the beach have multiplied, dozens of them now, perhaps hundreds. They're moving toward the water, their forms becoming more translucent as they approach the waves. You realize with a chill that you're watching the same departure you'd seen in your vision, the island's creators returning to the ocean that spawns them, or accepting it as their final resting place. Sarah is frantically trying to document everything, but her equipment is failing in increasingly spectacular ways. Cameras short out, batteries drain in seconds, recording devices capture only static. The island is preparing to depart, and it seems determined not to leave behind evidence that would let the world dismiss its warning as fantasy or fraud. You feel it in your bones when the transition begins. A subtle shift in the air pressure, a change in the way sound travels, as if reality is holding its breath. The sphere on its platform begins to glow, not with light exactly, but with a kind of concentrated darkness that somehow illuminates rather than obscures. The ruins around it start to hum, a sound that you feel more than hear, resonating at a frequency that makes your teeth ache and your vision blur. "We need to leave," you tell Sarah, grabbing her arm. "Now." She resists for a moment, unwilling to abandon the opportunity for observation, but then she feels it too, the island pulling away from the world, sliding back into whatever impossible space it occupies between appearances. You run for the beach, your equipment abandoned, the scientific method forgotten in the face of more primal imperatives. The inflatable boat seems impossibly far away, though it can't be more than 100 meters. The sand is changing beneath your feet, becoming less solid, more fluid, as if the island is already halfway to being ocean again. The figures in the water watch you struggle toward salvation, their expressions understanding but unsympathetic. This is the price of knowledge, their ancient eyes seem to say. This is the burden of witness. You reach the boat and shove it into the water, Sarah tumbling in beside you. Your hands fumble with the oars, clumsy with panic and haste. Behind you, the island is visibly sinking now, the ruins disappearing beneath rising water, the strange vegetation folding in on itself like a flower closing at nightfall. The sphere's glow intensifies one final time, and in that flash you see it all clearly. The pattern, the cycle, the inevitable conclusion that waits at the end of current trends. The research vessel seems to take forever to reach, though Captain Booty has brought it as close as he dares. Hands reach down to pull you aboard, voices asking questions you can't yet answer. You collapse on the deck, gasping, watching the place where the island had been. There's nothing there now but water, reflecting the last light of day, giving no indication that anything unusual ever existed in that spot. Sarah sits beside you, her scientific composure finally cracking. She's laughing and crying simultaneously, the sound slightly hysterical, but also somehow triumphant. You've witnessed something impossible, something that will change how you understand the world, even if you can never prove it to anyone else. That night, as the research vessel motors away from the coordinates that now show nothing but empty ocean, you and Sarah compile your evidence. The blurred photographs, the inconsistent sample readings, the equipment failures, all of it adds up to a story that no one will believe. But you have to try. The island appeared for a reason, delivered its warning to those who would listen. You spend hours writing the report, trying to find words that convey the urgency without sounding like madness. Sarah contributes technical details, scientific observations, anything that might lend credibility. When you're finished, you both know it's not enough. The world isn't ready to believe in impossible islands and ancient warnings delivered through obsidian spheres. The evidence is too ambiguous, too easily dismissed. But as dawn breaks on a new day, you realize that belief isn't actually necessary. The warning has been delivered, whether anyone accepts it or not. The island will appear again when conditions warrant, will continue its cycle of emergence and submergence, faithful to its purpose across centuries and millennia. You stand on the deck and look back toward the horizon, toward the spot where the impossible briefly became real. The ocean keeps its secrets well, you think, but sometimes when the need is great enough, it shares them with those who have the courage to listen. Captain Booty joins you at the rail, his weathered face thoughtful. "My grandfather saw it once," he says quietly. "Told me stories when I was young. I thought he was just an old man, his mind going, making up tales." He pauses, then adds, "I'm sorry I didn't believe him. I understand now why he spent his last years trying to warn people about the ocean's patience running out." The research vessel sails on through calm seas, carrying you back toward a world that will never quite make sense again. Somewhere in your cabin, the sample container sits with its impossible sand, still shifting into patterns that might be writing or might be random movement. The photographs fill your camera's memory, blurred evidence of something that existed between one moment and the next. You know you'll spend the rest of your career trying to understand what you witnessed, trying to decode the warning, trying to find a way to make people listen. Sarah will too, her scientific skepticism transformed into evangelical certainty by the touch of the sphere. Together, you'll become those people others whisper about, the scientists who claim to have found an island that can't exist, who warn about disasters written in ancient stone and encoded in volcanic glass. But on quiet nights, when sleep eludes you, and the sound of waves reminds you of that impossible shore, you'll know the truth. The island will appear again, exactly when it needs to, carrying its message forward through time. And somewhere, the ocean keeps its vigil, patient and eternal, waiting to see if humanity will finally learn to listen before the balance tips too far and the correction begins. The warning has been given. The rest, as it always has been, is up to those who have the wisdom to heed it. Sleep to history's mysteries. The lost continents. The world quiets around you as night settles in, and as your thoughts drift like distant tides against a darkened shore, we step softly into the half-remembered places of the earth. You breathe slowly, gently, letting the last traces of the day dissolve. The oceans deepen around us. The stars draw faint silver lines across the sky, and beneath that vastness lies a question as old as humanity itself. What vanished beneath the waves? What worlds were lost to time? Tonight we drift back, far back, into the silent waters of history's greatest mysteries. The lost continents, whispered in ancient texts and echoed in geological riddles, pull us into their quiet embrace. They are places that shimmer at the edge of memory, half myth, half possibility, suspended somewhere between science and dreams. They exist in that tranquil space where facts cradle legends, and where legends fall gently into the sea. Let your breathing settle into a soft rhythm. Let the mind loosen like soft sand under tide. We begin now, drifting across the surface of the world's forgotten lands. Far beneath the Atlantic Ocean, the water is still and old, colder than memory, darker than unlit caverns. Here lie the first whispers. Atlantis, Plato's voice, drifts through time like a quiet tide, telling of a grand island empire, rich in shining temples, wide avenues, and circular harbours carved with mathematical perfection. It was said to be larger than Libya and Asia combined, a jewel of the ancient world, until the sea claimed it in a single day and night of ruin. Imagine, for a moment, gliding silently above that deep ocean floor. The water stretches endlessly, a world without wind or wave in this nighttime calm. And somewhere far below, layered in silt and quiet darkness, may rest the faintest ghost of a world that once breathed. Stone pillars fallen like forgotten memories, pathways swallowed in shifting sand, the outlines of a city that may have lived only in story, or may have existed long before recorded time, when coastlines were younger and seas had not yet risen to swallow the world. Atlantis is the most famous of the lost continents, but it is only one dream among many. The earth has forgotten more shores than it remembers. Let your breath slow, like waves washing over worn stone. Far to the south, beyond the cold currents curling around Africa's edge, ancient sailors whispered of Lemuria, a continent stretching across the Indian Ocean, an ancestral homeland of forgotten peoples or vanished creatures. It was proposed in the days before plate tectonics, an attempt to explain mysteries of biology and migration, but its name lingered. Lemuria became a place not of science, but of imagination, lush, tropical, a cradle of early humanity, or lost civilizations whose temples now lie beneath coral and drifting sand. Some pictured it as swaying with emerald forests and rivers wide as seas. Others imagined tall white cities rising above turquoise lagoons. And in every imagining, Lemuria sank long before recorded memory, leaving only fragments in myths from India, Madagascar, Indonesia, and beyond. Now, imagine drifting above that warm sea. The moonlight rests over the water, like a thin sheet of silver. Beneath the surface, shadows shift as if remembering shorelines. Long vanished volcanic ridges curl upward like the silhouettes of broken mountains. The ocean floor drops and rises in quiet patterns, hinting at the possibility that once, long ago, something vast stood here, kissed by sun and wind. You float, weightless, letting your thoughts move slowly, gently. But let us drift farther still to the Pacific, largest, deepest expanse of water on Earth, a world unto itself, a place of silence older than civilization. Here lie legends that predate even the oldest stone carvings, the stories of Mu, long before modern theories. Mystics and Victorian explorers spoke of a continent stretching across the Pacific, home to a sophisticated ancient people who built temples and monuments across what are now small scattered islands. Perhaps Hawaii, Tahiti, Rapa Nui, Easter Island were once mountaintops of a vast land swallowed by the sea. Perhaps the colossal Moai statues are not signs of isolation, but remnants of a culture connected by land that is now gone. As you drift deeper into calm, imagine following the currents toward Rapa Nui. The waves lap gently around giant stone faces staring eternally toward the horizon behind them. Green slopes rise, and beyond them, ocean. Only ocean. Yet the Polynesian stories speak of Hiva, their ancestral home, a great island or continent destroyed in a cataclysm. And as your mind wanders softly through the night, you may picture lush valleys, stone temples, terraces crawling up mountainsides, all now buried beneath an endless Pacific blue. The idea of Mu lingers, not because it is proven, but because it resonates with something deep in the human spirit, a desire to understand where we came from and what worlds existed before us. The ocean holds so many secrets, and silence is often mistaken for absence. Let your shoulders loosen. Let the quiet flow through you like a warm tide. Across the world, ancient maps and legends speak of lands now swallowed or shifted. When Earth's crust moved and changed, when ice sheets melted and seas rose by hundreds of feet, entire landscapes vanished Sundaland. Once a sprawling extension of Southeast Asia, was a vast, fertile region during the last ice age. Rivers wound through plains where now only the South China Sea lies. Human ancestors may have walked along great valleys and settled in coastal cities, now lost to the deep. Slowly, as the glaciers melted, the sea crept forward like a silent tide, filling riverbeds, covering forests, and turning mountains into islands. Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, and the Philippines are fragments of a world once whole, a world now hidden beneath warm tropical waters. Imagine traveling through these Pacific shallows in the soft night. The moon reveals faint shapes beneath the waves, ridges, plateaus, perhaps the outlines of ancient river channels. In the quiet of sleep, it is easy to imagine lights glowing faintly in the deep, lanterns of forgotten villages, or fires long extinguished, but remembered by the earth. Night deepens around us. We drift westward now, toward the Mediterranean, once far lower, carved by rivers flowing through what are now deep basins. When the Atlantic poured in millions of years ago, it transformed the landscape entirely. In this place of shifting seas and rising stones, some believed in the lost land of Tartessos, an ancient Iberian kingdom of silver and bronze, of traders and storytellers, swallowed by floods or earthquakes. Others imagined the long-lost island of Lyonesse off the coast of Britain, a land of saints and monasteries, drowned in a single night. Fishermen still tell of church bells ringing from beneath the waves. Whether myth or memory, such stories cling to coastlines everywhere, reminders that the sea slowly reclaims all things. Let your breathing soften, let the weight of the past settle into a gentle whisper. Toward the far north, beneath ice and shifting tectonic plates, lies the mystery of Hyperborea, an ancient land of eternal spring in the frozen realms beyond the north wind. It appears in Greek texts as a paradise untouched by war or sorrow. Some equated it with lands that once lay ice-free during warm epochs. Others saw it as pure myth. But the Earth's climate has shifted many times, and there were ages when the Arctic was green, wrapped in forests and warm breezes. Beneath Greenland's ice sheet lies evidence of ancient vegetation, lakes, and flowing rivers. Worlds erased not by water, but by ice. When your mind rests in the darkness of night, it becomes easier to imagine that once, far above the world, there flourished a land of gentle sunlight and unending calm. And still we drift. South now, to the rim of the Pacific, where the Bering Land Bridge once connected Asia and America. A broad plain, now lost beneath frigid waters, may have supported entire cultures, scattered settlements, and the first human migrations into the New World. The wind that blows over the Bering Sea carries the faintest echo of footsteps across a land long gone. And farther still, beneath the cold waves of the North Sea, lies Doggerland, once the heart of Europe's prehistoric world. It stretched between Britain and Scandinavia, teeming with wildlife, forests, and human settlers. Then, slowly, the sea rose. A tsunami struck, and the land faded, leaving behind only fishing nets that occasionally drag up bones, tools, and fragments of a forgotten life. All across the world, the Earth has erased continents, not always through sudden catastrophe, but often through slow, gentle transformation, like a tide reshaping a shoreline grain by grain. Let your thoughts drift like these grains. Let the quiet carry you. The stories of lost continents are not simply tales of destruction, but reminders of how deeply the world has changed. Shorelines are temporary mountains rise and fall. Forests become seas. Seas become deserts. Civilizations blossom and wither. The earth is ancient, far older than memory, older than legend, older than the words we use to describe time itself. You float now in a world of possibility, imagining coastlines lit by torchlight, temples glowing beneath starlit skies, entire continents alive with cultures that vanished long before anything was written in stone. You drift, calm and weightless, through the stories the ocean keeps. The sea is vast, and so are the memories hidden beneath it. And as we continue this quiet journey toward the deepest, oldest mysteries the planet has ever known, we move ever closer to the edge where myth and history begin to blur, where the ether whispers drift through the deep like soft currents, moving through time as effortlessly as the tide. And as we descend again into that vastness of quiet ocean and forgotten worlds, Your breathing stays slow and gentle, like the steady rhythm of waves washing over an ancient shore. Darkness below grows thicker, but it is not a frightening darkness. It is warm, familiar, like a blanket of time settling over the earth, hiding secrets too old for writing, too large for memory. We drift deeper, letting the ancient waters guide us into places long submerged, long silent. Somewhere in that stillness, there lies an understanding that the continents beneath our feet are not fixed things. They shift, they drift, they crumble, and sometimes they vanish entirely. Just as the mind sheds thoughts as it moves toward rest, so too does the earth shed landscapes, trading mountains for plains, shores for seas, land for water. Entire worlds are born, erased, and reborn again across millions of years, each one slipping quietly into the next like a dream, fading into another dream. We drift now towards Zealandia, one of the most extraordinary lost continents of all. Unlike Atlantis, Mu, or Lemuria, Zealandia is not legend but geological truth. Almost the size of Australia, it lies submerged beneath the Pacific Ocean, with only the mountain peaks visible today, as New Zealand, New Caledonia, and a few scattered islands. For millions of years, it rose and fell with tectonic breath. Then, long ago, the sea gently swept across it, leaving only fragments above water. Imagine hovering above its drowned surface. The moonlight paints a soft silver glow across the waves. Beneath them lies a vast plateau, carved by rivers that have not run for tens of millions of years. There are valleys deep enough to hold entire mountain ranges, and mountains tall enough to once have scraped the sky. But all of it now rests under the weight of the ocean, a continent hiding in plain sight, a reminder that even the land we know today can slip quietly into the sea. We breathe softly, drifting. The water grows calm around us. To the west, beneath the Bay of Bengal, lies another mystery, the rumoured lost land of Kumari Kandam. In Tamil tradition, it was said to be a cradle of ancient civilization, a great southern continent connecting India to Antarctica. Modern geology tells another story, yet the legend persists in the hearts of millions. A tale of a land once filled with poets, scholars, and sages. Like many lost worlds, it may carry memories of real ancient floods. Coastal plains drowned by rising seas after the last ice age. Villages swallowed slowly as the shoreline crept inland. Imagine walking along a prehistoric coast where families once lived, where fires once burned, where waves once washed against soil, now hundreds of feet below the modern ocean. As the water rose, inch by inch, year by year, the land receded. Stories remained. Over time, the stories became legend, and legends became the lost continent of Kumari Kandam. The earth is shaped not only by mountains and seas, but also by memory, and memory changes shape as gently as waves smoothing stone. We drift now toward the middle of the Indian Ocean, where the sea floor reveals scars, ridges, plateaus, and sunken fragments of an ancient world. Beneath the Mauritius waters lies evidence of a lost microcontinent called Mauritia, hidden beneath layers of volcanic rock and coral. Long before humans walked the earth, Mauritia split and sank beneath the waves, leaving only Madagascar, India, and tiny island chains as hints of its existence. It had no cities, no temples, no people, but its disappearance shows how easily even whole continents can vanish, leaving only geological whispers behind. Let your shoulders relax, your breath slow and deep. The world grows quieter, softer, more distant. Around us, the planet's history stretches far beyond human memory. There were times when Earth's landmasses were assembled into supercontinents: Pangaea, Gondwana, Laurasia, vast sweeping realms where deserts stretched from horizon to horizon and forests ran unbroken across thousands of miles. But before these giants rose, others existed: Rodinia, Columbia, Nuna, each forming, breaking, drifting, and dissolving into oceans that have long since changed shape. Imagine watching continents move as if in slow motion. You stand on ancient stone while mountains rise like long, soft breaths the earth's seas melt away. Rivers carve new paths, valleys deepen, islands drift apart. Everything shifts so slowly that it feels motionless, yet over millions of years, entire worlds rearrange themselves. This is the Earth's quiet truth. Continents are momentary arrangements in an ocean of time. And yet, even against this immense backdrop, human stories cling tightly to vanished lands. We hear echoes of them in Polynesian chants, in Greek philosophy, in Indian epics, in Egyptian priestly tales, and in medieval legends whispered across coastlines. Many cultures speak of lands taken by the sea, sometimes in violent storms, sometimes in gentle rises that unfolded over generations. These stories may not be literal histories, but they capture something true about humanity. That people remember the sea moving, rising, swallowing land. They remember coasts that no longer exist. They remember migrations forced by tides. And over thousands of years, these memories become mythic continents, lost to all but the imagination. Let your mind drift through this tapestry of ancient memory. Let it unravel gently, like mist over a calm morning shore. The Mediterranean hides traces of Bronze Age settlements drowned by earthquakes and shifting coastlines. The Black Sea may have once been a freshwater lake until the ocean broke through, flooding entire valleys. In Japan, sunken ruins off Yonaguni resemble stepped pyramids, carved by nature, perhaps, or shaped by early humans whose world was slowly overtaken by water. Off the coast of India, near Dwarka, divers found stone structures covered in coral, hinting at settlements older than recorded civilization. Everywhere the sea touches land, the sea eventually takes it back. We drift west again toward the Atlantic. Beneath the waters near the Bahamas lie the Bimini Road, rectangular stones arranged in a pattern that some believe are remnants of an ancient civilization. More likely they are natural formations, but even so, their shape invites the imagination to wander. And imagination is part of what keeps lost continents alive. As you breathe softly, the story continues to unfold like a gentle tide. The Azores rise from a deep Atlantic ridge where volcanic mountains push through the sea. Some believe these islands were once peaks of a larger landmass. Ancient maps drawn before the discovery of the Americas showed phantom islands dotting this ocean. Antillia, Brazil, High Brazil, lands that sailors insisted they saw, even if no one could ever find them again. Perhaps they were tricks of light upon the water, perhaps they were misremembered coastlines, or perhaps, long ago when sea levels were lower, these places truly existed above the waves. As night wraps its calm around your thoughts, you drift through these possibilities without needing answers. The beauty of lost continents lies not in proving them, but in wondering about them. Far to the south, Antarctica itself may guard ancient landscapes buried beneath miles of ice, mountain ranges, valleys, and maybe lakes untouched for millions of years. There were ages when this icy world was covered in forests, where warm breezes carried moisture across a land now locked in frozen silence. Beneath its glaciers may rest fossils of unknown species, traces of climates long forgotten. Antarctica was once part of Gondwana, connected to Australia, Africa, India, South America. When these continents tore apart, Antarctica moved southward, slowly freezing into its modern stillness. Imagine that slow drift, the land becoming colder and quieter, the forests withering, the final rivers freezing into silence, the continent turning to ice, carrying inside it the memory of warm, ancient worlds now completely lost. You sink deeper into calm, and from these geological secrets, we return once more to the human stories, the legends that keep the world's imagination alive. For even if Atlantis never existed as a physical place, it exists as an idea, a reminder of fragility, of knowledge lost, of civilizations that rise and fall like tides. Lemuria symbolizes migration, the mystery of origins, the yearning to understand where humanity began. Mu represents the vastness of the Pacific and the deep time woven into island cultures. Kumari Kandam reflects ancient flood memories and the shifting of coastlines over millennia. All these stories are maps, not of land, but of longing. As you drift, the world grows softer around you. Thoughts slow, breathing settles. The continents of the earth fade into silhouettes beneath a dark ocean sky. Even if no ancient advanced civilizations existed on these lost continents, the planet is full of forgotten worlds, real landscapes that vanish beneath rising seas as the Ice Age ended. Entire regions the size of countries now lie underwater, filled with the remains of forests, plains, and possibly the footprints of people who lived close to the shifting shores. Wherever the ocean is deep, there is the possibility of what once was. Let your mind wander to the depths now, as though floating above the world in a gentle, timeless drift. The ocean is a vast library, its shelves made of stone, its pages written in layers of sediment. Keeps its stories locked beneath pressure and darkness, giving only subtle hints. A fossil lifted from the seabed, a submerged forest, a forgotten coastline revealed by sonar. The earth holds more history than we can ever uncover, and more mysteries than we can ever solve. You drift now through the last currents of the story, carried by slow, rhythmic waves. The lost continents around you fade into silhouettes, quiet and unreachable, but comforting in their mystery. They remind us that the world is not static. It is alive, constantly shifting, constantly remembering and forgetting. The ocean hums softly, its surface smooth beneath the moonlit sky. Somewhere far below, untouched for ages, lie the remnants of landscapes we will never fully map, mountains worn by time, valleys deepened by ancient rivers, shorelines erased long before the first human drew breath. The earth is ancient, and we are only passing through its memories. And as the story settles into silence, you remain weightless, calm, drifting between the known and the unknown. There is no urgency here, no need for answers, only the soft comfort of possibility, of imagining worlds hidden just beyond reach. The continents that once were, and may never be again, rest beneath the sea in eternal quiet, but in your mind they drift on, glowing faintly like lanterns carried across dark waters, guiding you toward rest. You exhale slowly. The night deepens. The waves still. The lost continents fade into peaceful darkness, and you drift gently, softly, into sleep. Earth's forgotten continents whisper softly from the depths. The lost city of the Hittites. You've probably heard of the Romans, the Greeks, maybe even the Assyrians, but the Hittites, for most of history, they were completely forgotten, erased so thoroughly from human memory that they became little more than mysterious names scattered through ancient texts. Yet 3,000 years ago, they ruled one of the most powerful empires the world had ever seen, with their capital hidden somewhere in the heart of Anatolia, waiting to be rediscovered. The story begins not with ancient warriors or bronze chariots, but with a 19th century French explorer named Charles Texier wandering through the Turkish countryside in 1834. He wasn't looking for lost cities. He was searching for Roman ruins, following old maps and older rumors. But what he stumbled upon in a remote village called Boğazkale would rewrite everything scholars thought they knew about the ancient world. Picture the scene. Rolling hills covered in scrubby grass. Shepherds tending their flocks among weathered stones that seemed far too regular, far too intentional to be natural formations. Texier noticed something the locals had long taken for granted. Massive stone blocks carved with strange figures and inscriptions in a language nobody could read. These weren't Roman. They were far, far older. The ruins stretched across the landscape, suggesting a city of enormous proportions, yet no historical record he knew mentioned anything about such a place existing here. What Texier had found were the remains of Hattusa, the capital of the Hittite Empire, a civilization so completely lost to time that even its name had been forgotten. The city had been abandoned around 1200 BCE. During that mysterious period historians call the Bronze Age collapse, when civilizations across the Mediterranean crumbled almost simultaneously. For over 3,000 years, Hattusa lay silent, its temples and palaces slowly dissolving back into the earth, its people's achievements fading into myth. But here's where the story gets interesting. While Texier had found the physical city, nobody yet knew what it was. The Bible mentioned Hittites, describing them as one of the peoples living in Canaan, but most scholars dismissed these references as legendary or insignificant. Some even argued the Hittites never existed at all, that they were just another fictional tribe invented by biblical scribes. The ruins Texier found seemed important, certainly, but important to whom? What empire had built them? The answer lay buried in the thousands of clay tablets scattered throughout the ruins, written in cuneiform script that looked tantalizingly familiar, yet frustratingly unreadable. These tablets sat in museums for decades, while scholars puzzled over them, trying to crack their code. The breakthrough came in 1915, when a Czech linguist named Bedřich Hrozný managed to decipher the language. What he discovered was revolutionary. The Hittite language was Indo-European, related to Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, and most modern European languages. This meant that 3,000 years ago, people speaking an ancient ancestor of English, German, and Hindi had ruled a vast empire from the mountains of Anatolia. Suddenly, the biblical references made sense. The Hittites weren't minor tribal people. They were major players on the ancient world stage, powerful enough to challenge Egypt itself. In fact, archaeologists discovered that the Hittites had fought the Egyptians to a standstill at the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE, one of the largest chariot battles in history. The subsequent peace treaty between the Hittite king Hattusili III and the Egyptian pharaoh Rameses II is the oldest surviving international peace agreement, and a copy still hangs in the United Nations building in New York. But what was life actually like in Hattusa? As excavations continued through the 20th century, a picture began to emerge of a sophisticated urban centre unlike anything else in the Bronze Age world. The city was massive, covering about 180 hectares at its height, with a population estimated between 40,000 and 50,000 people. That might not sound huge by modern standards, but for the Bronze Age it was enormous, rivaling the greatest cities of Egypt and Mesopotamia. The city's defences were particularly impressive. Hattusa was surrounded by a double wall stretching for 6 kilometres, built from massive stone blocks that still stand in places today. These weren't simple barriers, they were sophisticated fortifications featuring towers, gates, and a complex system of defensive positions. 3 monumental gates pierced these walls: the Lion Gate, decorated with carved stone lions; the King's Gate, featuring a relief of a Hittite warrior god; and the mysterious Sphinx Gate, originally flanked by massive Sphinx sculptures that are now displayed in museums in Istanbul and Berlin. Walking through these gates 3,000 years ago, you would have entered a city built on multiple terraces, climbing up the rocky hillside. The lower city contained the homes of ordinary citizens, workshops, and storage facilities. But as you climbed higher, the buildings became grander, the streets wider. The upper city held the palaces and temples of the Hittite elite, structures built with a combination of stone foundations and mud brick walls, their interiors likely painted with colourful frescoes. The heart of Hattusa was the great temple, dedicated to the storm god Teshub and the sun goddess Arena. This wasn't just a place of worship, it was an economic powerhouse, controlling vast estates and employing hundreds of workers. Archaeologists found clay tablets here, recording everything from religious rituals to grain inventories, giving us an incredibly detailed picture of how this temple economy functioned. The complex included storage rooms, workshops, and living quarters for priests and temple staff. Some of these storage rooms still contain the massive clay jars called pithoi that once held grain, oil, and wine. But perhaps the most exciting discovery at Hattusa was the royal archives, thousands upon thousands of clay tablets that served as the administrative heart of the empire. These weren't just religious texts or propaganda, they were the real working documents of government. Treaties with foreign powers, legal codes, royal correspondence, military records, and even the private letters of kings and queens. Reading through these tablets is like eavesdropping on conversations from 3,000 years ago, hearing the concerns, fears, and ambitions of people long dead. One particularly fascinating set of tablets records the correspondence between the Hittite queen Puduhepa and the Egyptian queen Nefertari, wives of the kings who made peace after the Battle of Kadesh. These letters show sophisticated women engaging in international diplomacy, discussing everything from the terms of the peace treaty to arrangements for a royal wedding between the two dynasties. Puduhepa writes with authority and intelligence, clearly a major political player in her own right, not just a decorative consort. Tablets also revealed something unexpected about Hittite law and society. Unlike many ancient civilizations, the Hittites seem to have had a relatively humane legal system. Their law codes emphasized restitution over punishment, preferring compensation to victims rather than brutal retribution against criminals. For many crimes, even serious ones, the penalty was simply to pay back what was taken or damaged, plus additional compensation. The death penalty existed but was reserved for only the most serious offences, particularly those involving treason or sorcery. Women in Hittite society appear to have had more rights than in many contemporary cultures. They could own property, conduct business, and even divorce their husbands under certain circumstances. Queens like Puduhepa wielded real political power, serving as co-rulers alongside their husbands and continuing to influence policy even after their husbands' deaths. The tablets mention female scribes, priestesses, and business owners, suggesting that educated, economically independent women weren't unusual in Hittite cities. The Hittites were also remarkably tolerant when it came to religion. Rather than imposing their gods on conquered peoples, they simply added foreign deities to their own pantheon. The result was an incredibly diverse religious landscape, with Hurrian, Babylonian, and local Anatolian gods all worshipped alongside traditional Hittite deities. The Hittites believed that all gods were real and powerful, so it made sense to honor as many as possible. This theological flexibility probably helped them maintain control over their diverse empire, allowing subject peoples to keep their traditional beliefs while still acknowledging Hittite political authority. The religious center of the Hittite world wasn't actually in Hattusa itself, but about a kilometer away at a place called Yazilakaya, an open-air rock sanctuary that remains one of the most mysterious and evocative Hittite sites. Here, carved into the living rock, is an extraordinary procession of gods and goddesses, more than 60 deities marching in two converging lines. The main gallery shows male gods approaching from one side and female deities from the other, meeting in the center where the storm god Teshub faces the sun goddess Arena, the chief deities of the Hittite pantheon. The precision of these carvings, the artistry of the relief work, and the sheer ambition of decorating an entire rock outcrop with divine imagery speaks to the importance of this sanctuary. Scholars believe it was used for important seasonal festivals, particularly the spring celebration of the new year, when the Hittite king would renew his relationship with the gods and reaffirm his right to rule. But despite their power, their sophisticated culture, and their impressive achievements, the Hittites vanished. Around 1200 BCE, Hattusa was abandoned, burned, and left to the elements. The exact sequence of events remains mysterious, but it seems to have been part of that broader Bronze Age collapse that destroyed or severely damaged virtually every major civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean. The palaces of Mycenaean Greece burned. The great cities of the Levant were destroyed. The Egyptian New Kingdom barely survived, and the Hittite Empire simply ceased to exist. What caused this collapse? Scholars have proposed numerous theories, and the truth probably involves a combination of factors rather than a single cause. Climate change appears to have played a role, with evidence suggesting a severe drought affecting the entire region. The Hittite tablets themselves mention food shortages, with desperate letters from the last kings requesting emergency grain shipments from Egypt. Famine-weakened states makes populations restless and can trigger migration and conflict. There's also evidence of invasion and warfare. Egyptian records mention mysterious sea peoples, maritime raiders who attacked coastal cities throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Some scholars think these weren't a unified force, but rather displaced populations, refugees from other collapsed regions, who turned to raiding and migration when their own societies failed. The Hittite tablets mention attacks by groups from the west, possibly these same sea peoples or related populations displaced by turmoil in the Aegean. Internal political instability likely contributed as well. The tablets hint at succession disputes and power struggles among the Hittite elite. When external pressures mounted, the empire may have simply fractured along these existing fault lines, unable to mount a coordinated response to the cascading crises. The last known Hittite king, Suppiluliuma II, left records of military campaigns, but then the written record simply stops. We don't know how he died or what happened to the royal family. What we do know is that someone made the decision to abandon Hattusa. The archaeological evidence suggests this wasn't a sudden catastrophe, but a deliberate evacuation. People took their valuables, packed up what they could carry, and left. Then the city burned, whether accidentally or intentionally, we can't say. The massive stone fortifications remained standing, but the wooden and mud brick structures collapsed and crumbled. Wind-blown soil gradually covered the ruins, grass and shrubs took root, and within a few generations, the greatest city of Anatolia had disappeared beneath the earth. The Hittite people didn't vanish entirely, though. Their empire fragmented into smaller kingdoms that survived for several more centuries in what scholars call the Neo-Hittite period. These kingdoms, centered in what is now southern Turkey and northern Syria, maintained elements of Hittite culture, writing, and religion, even as they mixed with Aramean and other populations. Eventually, they too were conquered and absorbed by the expanding Assyrian Empire in the 8th and 7th centuries BCE. The last speakers of the Hittite language probably died out sometime in the first millennium BCE, and with them went the living memory of their great empire. For the next 2.5 millennia, the Hittites existed only in fragmentary references, mysterious names in Egyptian inscriptions, and biblical texts that nobody could fully explain. The city of Hattusa lay silent, its stones slowly weathering, its tablets waiting patiently to tell their stories. Local villagers used the ancient stones for building material, unwittingly incorporating pieces of temples and palaces into their humble homes. They had no idea they were living among the ruins of an empire. When Texier first saw those ruins in 1834, he recognized their importance, but couldn't identify their builders. When the tablets were finally deciphered decades later, the revelation was stunning. Here was a major Bronze Age civilization, completely forgotten, being brought back to life through archaeology and scholarship. It was as if an entire chapter of human history had been restored, filling in gaps that scholars didn't even know existed. Modern excavations continue to reveal new aspects of Hittite civilization. Advanced technologies like ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery have identified previously unknown structures buried beneath the soil. Recent discoveries include what appears to be a large administrative complex in the lower city, and possible royal tombs that haven't yet been excavated. Each field season brings new tablets, new artifacts, new insights into how these people lived, worked, prayed, and governed. The lost city of Hattusa teaches us something important about history and memory. Entire civilizations can be forgotten, their achievements erased, their very existence questioned. The Hittites ruled an empire, fought Egypt to a standstill, developed sophisticated laws and governance, created beautiful art and architecture, and then simply vanished from human memory. If not for archaeologists patiently reconstructing their story from ruins and tablets, we might never have known they existed. Standing among the ruins of Hattusa today, you can still feel the weight of that lost empire. The massive stone gates still guard empty streets. The foundations of the great temple still mark out sacred space, and the rock carvings at Yazilikaya still show their procession of forgotten gods. The wind whispers through the ruins, much as it must have 3,000 years ago, when this was a living city full of voices, activity, and ambition. The Hittites believed their empire would last forever, that their gods would protect them, that their power was eternal. They were wrong, of course, but then so was everyone else who thought the Bronze Age would never end. The lost city of the Hittites reminds us that even the mightiest civilizations are temporary, that power and glory fade, and that sometimes the only thing that survives is the story, waiting in the earth to be rediscovered and told again to new generations who will, perhaps, learn something from those who came before.